Hi, dear listeners. This is Kate Riga. I'm here to make a quick pitch that you consider becoming a TPM Prime member. TPM has used the member model for over a decade now, and our loyal members are the only reason we've been able to weather the turbulence of the media landscape and avoid the fate that has befallen so many other independent outlets. For $70, you get no paywall, fewer ads, access to the Hive member forum, a members only newsletter, and more. For $140 a year, you get all of that, plus no ads at all. Without our members, there is no podcast, not to mention that I'm out of a job. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. We couldn't do it without you.
Hi, this is Josh Marshall, and this is the Josh Marshall podcast featuring Kate Riga. We are in the center of the storm, folks. I don't know how else to put it. Just before we started recording this morning, I was doing reporting on there are rumors all over the place right now. And by the time you listen to this podcast, you will know things. You will know more things that have happened or not happened than we do right now. What I was working on, reporting on, yesterday, the at the Social Security Administration last week, they took a guy who was a mid-level employee, a guy named Leland Dudek, and he had gotten in trouble for reaching out to Doge and trying to share confidential information with Doge about the Social Security Administration. So he was in the process of being disciplined and probably fired. And Doge swept in, uh, essentially fired the acting commissioner of the Social Security Administration and put him in charge of the entire place. And yesterday, he abolished what's called CREO, which is the Civil Rights and Equal Opportunity Division of the Social Security Administration. This isn't like one little office down at the end of the building. Not at all clear that that's legal, what that's about. And I was trying to track down rumors this morning of what I will just call very big staff cuts at the Social Security Administration. And I don't know whether they're happening or not. And similar uncertainty is, abroad on the land with almost every agency of the federal government right now. Now, the other thing that I was following this morning was there was another step forward in what I think will be the fairly intense and longstanding legal and bureaucratic trench warfare over these firings. A federal board decided that this OSC ruling that came out on Monday, let me just try to place you with what all this means. There is something called the Office of Special Counsel that found on Monday that 6 employees had been wrongfully terminated. 6 employees from 6 different agencies. This works kind of like a court in the sense that this isn't just about those 6. It likely applies to everybody who is similarly situated to those. So that Office of Special Counsel decided, no, this was unlawful. And today, the board that they go to say, we think this, can you reinstate these people? That board said, yes, we are going to reinstate these people because this was unlawful. So on the one hand, we have these massive and unbelievable and often illegal, clearly illegal things going on. And now we have the legal and bureaucratic arms of the federal government sort of rousing to life, for lack of a better word. And that's where we are. And while that is happening, we have a whole different, but obviously deeply related process taking place on Capitol Hill, and that's what we're going to jump right into now. So let me just give this to Kate. There was this big vote last night in the House, a victory for Mike Johnson, although he's got to have a lot of victories going forward. What happened? What's the report on what happened last night?
So, to clear up any confusion, what they did last night was basically the first procedural step you have to do to pass things through reconciliation. This is a separate entity than funding the government, which has to be done by March 14th, or there'll be a shutdown. The reconciliation process is going to take months. So, this is just getting it started. Like, we probably won't see more votes on the compromise reconciliation package until May, or, maybe even the summer. So, last night what they're trying to pass is like an outline basically through the House, saying the various committees will have to cut X amount of money, and this is our rough draft for how we're going to pay for Trump tax cuts, raise the budget ceiling, and um, you know so offset spending, loose structure like that. Now, in the way that this was a victory for Mike Johnson, even this draft seemed really hard for him to get through, right? Because you're convincing moderates to pay for something that will absolutely involve cuts to Medicaid, cuts to SNAP, um, other kind of benefit cuts that are going to make them nervous. You have to convince House Freedom Caucus to vote for a bill that, no matter what they say, will absolutely add to the debt. There are not enough offsets to make this, kind of budget neutral. Um, and then you just have the kind of like weirdos, like Victoria Spartz, who does this dance every single time, where she says she's not going to vote for something, read my lips, it's not going to happen, and then turns around and votes for it inevitably. So that's where things were last night. Amine was up on the Hill, God bless her, until like 10 p.m. covering this. And they're having these internecine fights, right? We've seen this movie before. You got groups coming into Johnson's office and groups coming out. You've got Trump on the phones to convince the holdouts, and nothing's coming together. And then they dismiss everyone. They say it's not happening. Go home for the night. Big embarrassment for the leadership team. And then like 5 minutes later, they're like, never mind, never mind, never mind. We're going to do it. Come back. It passes. So, and this is a situation where I think Johnson could only lose two. Democrats had one absence, from a member who's getting cancer treatment, but then you had some pretty heroic efforts from one member who had given birth 3 weeks ago, who rushed in and made it, another one who was in the hospital who made it. All the Democrats hung together to vote no. But again, this is separate than what we've been talking about in terms of withholding votes to use leverage. Opposing party members never vote for this stage of reconciliation. But, whatever. Democrats hung together. So now the downside for Johnson, even though, very celebratory mood among House Republicans, is that it gets so much harder from here, because on the one hand, you've got the Senate, which is moving with its own plan, right? The House is trying to do immigration, tax cuts, the whole enchilada in one package. The Senate wants to do it separately and is moving ahead with its first iteration of this, which is just the border security stuff paid for with like energy stuff. And the Senate is being quite open about, what the House just passed is unpassable in the Senate. There's going to be totally reworked. It's not going to look anything like that in order to get through our chamber. And that's in big part because senators don't want to vote for the Medicaid cuts, right?
Right. So it's not just a matter of one bill, two bills. Substantively, that they're saying that stuff is just dead on arrival here.
Totally. And then you already have these other sticking points, like the offsets in the House bill are nowhere near enough to make Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent. And that is, at least now, that's a line in the sand for Senate Republicans. Like, that's the one thing they kind of want to achieve out of this, not just give it a 5-year extension, but do it forever.
Right, right. And that's because under, if just for our listeners, all of this goes to the reconciliation system, which is sort of associated with Bob Byrd and these reforms they made in the 70s and 80s. And basically to get this holy grail benefit in this day and age of being able to pass all this with 50 votes in the Senate, it has to be, you have to show that it is budget neutral. It can't add to the deficit. And how they get away with blowing a hole in the deficit as they did in 2017 is that it's on a 10-year budget horizon. So you can kind of say, okay, we're doing this humongous thing that's going to blow a hole in the deficit, but it snaps back in 10 years. And that's why we're even talking about the Trump tax cut. Like, didn't we do the Trump tax cut? Blah, blah. So that's just to give our listeners a background. That's how that fits in. So if you really want to make them permanent, you've got to make deep, deep cuts to pull all of that off. But let me ask you, Kate. So okay. So the Senate Republicans want to do that, but they also don't want these kind of draconian Medicaid, SNAP, probably Obamacare, although as we've discussed, the line between Obamacare and Medicaid is a little fuzzy these days. Which is it, right? Because don't those
Well,
kind of contradict?
I mean, as it tends to be, austerity will give out in the face of kind of doing something they want to do. So if you think of 2017, they were singing a similar tune, right? They don't want to like totally blow up the deficit. And what do? They pass the tax cuts with nowhere near offsets and blow up the deficit, right? So I think
Right,
you can expect them to kind of prefer blowing up the deficit than taking on these huge cuts to really popular programs.
right,
Um, but another piece of this that I think is going to complicate this dance is House leadership basically told a lot of their frontline members, don't worry too much about the benefit cuts because the Senate is going to water them down. They're not going to stay this draconian. So,
right,
it's just it's as you say. I mean, this is the fundamental problem that Elon Musk is having and that Republicans have, right? I mean, if you want to do big tax cuts or big domestic spending, there there just isn't that much many places to go to cut that money to actually make it budget neutral, which is why we fall into this constant dance where Republicans explode the deficit when they're in charge and then as soon as a Democrat's in charge pretend
raw
that they're
retrenchment.
really into austerity
Yeah,
again, right? And
yeah,
there's no way
yeah,
we can
yeah.
possibly do this because it's too expensive.
But isn't there aren't Democrats saying or making clear that they will say, you just voted for it last night. That works for us. We're cutting the 30-second ads. Now, I guess the gist is that this is very general. That this is a blueprint. It's an outline. Not only can Republicans say, "Hey, that was an outline," just kind of a basis of conversation, but in the nature of things it's not that specific. So they can go to the local version of Snopes or whatever, or I guess it's not PolitiFact or whatever, and say, this isn't true. I just voted for something, a generic idea. I didn't actually vote. But again, for Democrats, I mean, if I am running in like a Mike Lawler race or something like that. This is a Republican representative in a very swingy district, just north of New York City. He's in any scenario, he's going to be at the top of the list of people who Democrats want to beat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If I'm running against him, I say, yeah, Lawler's down with this. He voted for it. Here's the vote. Let him say, oh, we were told the Senate was going to water it down. Good
Totally.
luck with that, right?
Right. It's nuts and bolts wise, we're at the stage where what they just passed says, the agricultural committee has to cut X million dollars. And then the reality is that can only come from SNAP, right? Like that's all the ag committee kind of has in its basket to cut from. But yeah, we're still at this like kind of top line muddy math. But I mean, totally. Democrats are desperate to make the conversation about cutting big programs that people really rely on, in part because it's also how they want to talk about the Elon Musk stuff, right? Like they don't
Hmm,
want to be
hmm.
in the position of kind of defending the bureaucracy, the unpopular bureaucracy. They want to be in the position of saying he's fucking with money you depend on to live, right? And to the extent that that can be symbiotic with what congressional Republicans are doing, that's like a pretty neat message. That's also a lot more comfortable for Democrats than some of the more like creative ideas people have been putting out there about the kind of more anti oligarchy positioning.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess, to me, um, in this constant, constant internal argument that Democrats have. Like, is it going to be, kitchen table issues, or is it going to be that, like, the Constitution isn't even really in operation right now, about the sort of the central facets of government? And uh, to me, kitchen table issues means a lot of things. It has become, shorthand within that conversation, which often sort of polarizes to this idea of, consultants versus DSA kind of, kind of binary, that it comes down to, like, oh, we're just talking about, the price of eggs, or, these very, poll tested things. But really, these things are not, these things should not be a binary, because it is absolutely true that you don't want to be it is silly to think you are going to contest even a midterm election on, uh just, democracy in the abstract, or kind of technical issues about rescission and impoundment and all this kind of stuff. These are not two separate things, right? Musk isn't out there, uh, uh, you know, uh, cutting. I don't know what. I mean, everything boils down to a kitchen table issue, really, right? I mean, we're talking about, uh, you know, are they going to take away your health care coverage so Elon Musk can get a huge tax cut? And they're trying to, the ways they need to do that. They can't get that to work through democratic means. So they are trying to, they're trying to kind of create these facts on the ground with Doge and stuff. It shouldn't be a, it doesn't need to be, it should not be an either or, because they are the same thing. Having said that, as you say, okay, there, and this is kind of what's behind that whole thing about, let's, how much are we going to go to war over the continuing resolution? Because I think that the Jeffries people are saying, and this is not a bad argument, like, look, they are politically slitting their throats here. They are passing a doomsday budget. They're already losing popularity. They're already canceling their town halls because it's going so bad. Why would you put something else into the mix that gives them even a chance to change the subject? So that's not a crazy argument, right? I don't think it's the correct argument, but it's not a crazy argument. So what are you, I guess you weren't there yesterday, but you are up there a lot, and sort of always metaphorically up there. What read are you getting of what Democrats are saying now? Democrats up on the Hill.
Yeah, I mean, it's Medicaid, SNAP, right?
Yep.
This is a budget to give rich people tax cuts in exchange for your benefits. I think one thing that's interesting, what we learned, and we've learned this before. This isn't a new thing, but it's just good to know in Trump Mark II that the people it's going to be hardest for Johnson to wrangle are the far right of the party. Like, you have these frontline members who talk a big game. You have people being protested at town halls, which we're going to get to next. None of those people change their behavior, right? They talk to reporters about how they don't like the Medicaid cuts, and they're not sure Doge is doing everything the way it should. And then they snap into line, right? And these people were not even the kind of 11th hour holdouts that were waiting for their special little call from Trump before they decided to vote. Like, those are people who say this is too much spending, right? The far right people, the Freedom Caucus types who don't like to spend anything on government, basically. And they too flipped in the end, right? I mean, I think more than anything else, what you can take from this is just how solid Trump's grip on particularly the House conference is by this point. Like, we're just at the place where I think there are only 2 people left in the House who voted to impeach Trump, and they've both survived a lot of cycles by this point, both by virtue of being in a swingy district and because they're kind of keep their head down types. They're not really just crafting an identity based on that vote.
Yeah, they
But
want to forget it, basically.
totally.
They're
But
like, that never happened. Yeah.
the House is just really in his thrall at this point. And what I think has been one of the biggest kind of disappointments for people hoping that there is some like vestige of the Republican Party that objects to what he's doing is that the Senate is the big brother, right? It's the more mature chamber. You've got people who've been in politics for a gajillion years, way longer than Trump has. That has been kind of the traditional source of opposition to Trump. And so I think a lot of people have experienced, I don't think people's hopes were super high, but a little bit of a come to Jesus there based on how easily the most ridiculously flawed cabinet got through. The fact that, even like Collins or Murkowski and McConnell could only muster opposition like a couple times, they didn't even do all the really objectionable people. I think it is something to keep in mind that the big question going into this was, has all opposition to Trump just really evaporated by this point? Like, has the political calculus changed so much that even people who maybe love Trump but feel like they have to at least do some performative standing up to him to win in their states or districts, like, does that still exist at all? And it really almost completely seems not to, even in this traditional realm of cutting Medicaid is the third rail. Do you really want to bring that upon yourself? People can only do these little one-off quotes and then are voting for it anyway, right? So that's going to be interesting to see in the Senate because there they have the option of doing this in a way that they maybe don't have to touch Medicaid, right? Which is best of both worlds, but it's just it's clarifying to see, right?
Right.
We're at the point where like Trump has changed the center of political gravity. Like calculations are not the same that they used to be. And given how thin the margins are and given the hell we thought it would be for Republicans to legislate under these conditions, at least I have come out of yesterday thinking like maybe it'll be somewhat less impossible than I thought it was going to be before. Because I was a little bit surprised by the fact that you had the whole Freedom Caucus kind of be like, no, this is fine, including a gigantic debt ceiling lift, which many of them have never voted for their whole time in Congress. Like things have changed in that reign.
Well, let me ask you this then, that, one of the things that we have been, well, the 2 points of leverage have been the continuing resolution and the debt ceiling. And as you just said, that they have rolled a debt ceiling increase into this budget. So this budget includes, I mean, I guess that could change, but at
Hmm.
least for now, they are online for for voting for a debt ceiling. So is it possible that the calculus is no longer the case, that maybe they can just do a continuing resolution on their own? Sort of
I
why
think,
not?
yeah, I would say that probably before this week, everyone would have said no way, no chance. And now I don't know. I don't know.
Right, right,
And
right,
maybe you had some people voting for the debt ceiling lift knowing that the Senate doesn't like doing it in reconciliation and that
right, right,
again, it
right.
might be a thing where you're like, I'll vote for this placeholder, the Senate's going to change it, who knows? And maybe when that's presented more as the headline and not the kind of also involved,
Yep,
then things change a little bit, but
yep.
yeah, that's where we are right now.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, because I have been saying, and this isn't just me. This has been like all conventional wisdom that it is impossible for them to pass a continuing resolution on their own. Impossible uh, for them to pass a debt ceiling on their own. Um, okay, so what if it's not impossible? What if they can do it? Well, then they can. then that leverage isn't there. But I think that just in terms of how people think about kind of what's the Democrats' plan, sometimes you need to uh, stand firm on a position, and then you stay with that position. And if they can do it, then you can say, like, look, they are in the majority. They're doing this. We're not going to participate. We're not going to give our, become complicit in this illegal, unconstitutional behavior. But if they can pass the continuing resolution, they can pass the continuing resolution. And look, elections have consequences. That's the reality. Um, I'm still skeptical that they can do this. And there's a few other. I mean, I'm curious what you think about this, Kate. I mean, my sense is that it is basically now almost impossible for anybody in Congress on the Republican side to oppose Donald Trump publicly at all. But we have already seen that that doesn't mean he gets his way every time. It means that things are handled differently. And I think about something like Matt Gaetz, where it's clear that with Gaetz, I think Republicans went to him in the Senate and they're like, dude, this is not happening. It's not happening. So you gotta, it's not happening. That they have an understanding. We're not gonna try to force your hand in public. But in any case, that's where that is. And I don't know, my what is what have you picked up, Kate, in terms of has these events at these town halls around the country, how has that reverberated on Capitol Hill, both on both sides of the aisle?
Well, it's made House Republican leadership tell them to stop holding town halls, so that's a piece of it.
Yeah.
This has happened before, though. This happened to Democrats when the ACA was still making
Hmm.
its way through.
Yep.
It happened to Republicans during ACA repeal,
Yep.
and it's not the first time that members have reacted by saying, "Well, that sucked. I'm never doing that again. See you later."
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
it doesn't change. I don't think that changes the reaction or the way people are feeling. So
But it is worth saying that in both cases the party in power got walloped
yep,
at the next election.
exactly. That's what I was gonna say. It's basically kind of a harbinger of things to come, even if you take away people's ability to kind of like thwack their representatives directly. It is a good measure for how things are going down at times in the political calendar where it's really hard to kind of get a finger on the pulse, especially
Yep.
because some of these halls are happening in very Republican districts, right? This is not just a kind of like antsy, demoralized Democrats looking for somewhere to vent their spleen, right? This
Hmm.
is happening to people in safe seats as well. And then the direct result is we saw some people on the Hill saying for the first time doing some Musk pushback, right? Like
Yep.
up until this point, I really can't emphasize enough how much I had to search to find Republicans who would say anything other than God, I love what he's doing. This is awesome, right? And now for the first time we're getting people being like, well, maybe he's being a little mean, you know? Maybe he's doing this a little quickly. Maybe
Right.
there should be more caution. And I think it's also kind of dawning on people that this idea of let's make hell for the bureaucrats, it does not just mean you're making life awful for people in Washington D.C., you know? I mean, the federal government is massive, right? It touches just every part of life. And so that's a piece of it, but I think I have to say the town halls were, like, really impactful for me because that was the first instance of, like, organic pushback to this
Hmm.
world order than
Hmm.
we've seen.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, it's we saw similar stuff happening in 2005, even in anticipation of the 2006 election. but actually around the same time in the cycle, because this was when Bush was trying to push phasing out Social Security and replacing it with private accounts. And when you decide not to hold town halls, that deprives people like us of some fun, right? It's sort of wild to see these town halls, but not holding town halls is sort of like the civic equivalent of when Trump was saying, "Hey, during the beginning at the beginning of the pandemic, if you stop testing, you get less cases. Why would you test?" Right? So it doesn't it doesn't change what's happening out there. You just have less visuals, and that matters at a certain level, because when people see, if you're if you're not a terribly political person and you see people on the nightly news are really upset, you're like, okay, maybe that's not just me thinking this is a little off. So it does have some impact, but not a lot. It really is basically the equivalent of not testing, so the case numbers won't go up. Um, and it's there's in a lot there's a lot of stuff that is happening right now that is not it's not showing up in in the sort of the mainstream political discourse, because one of the things that has been talked about in the news is, well, where does USAID get the food? It's a market for farmers, but that's not the only thing happening in the agriculture sector. There's also there's a whole ecosystem of loans, grants, all these kind of things that happen that make the agriculture sector work. And a lot of those are disrupted right now, that go through the USDA and all that kind of stuff. A lot of the national parks are kind of like shut down right now. So there's a lot of stuff, and you see that in these town halls, and a lot of you have the Republicans saying, "Oh, well, this is just the few Democrats in my district sounding off. They never voted for me." Because as Kate said, these ones we're seeing, these are not swing districts. These are like very red districts. Kind of Republican 10, Republican 20 districts. And to a certain extent, that's probably true, but not only. But there's what you say, but any actual politician knows, because your political foes can always show up. It's not like they're only allowed to show up when something like this is happening. It's a measure of the intensity of feeling, and intensity of feeling has a lot of impact in elections. And it's also, you end up bringing out people who just probably never been to a town hall before, but they just got fired. So my sense is that they have, in pretty key ways, they have already lost the fight for public opinion over this. And I'm pretty sure they're going to get walloped in 2026, certainly in the House, could be even in the Senate, possibly, depending on where things go. But I think, as we know, November 2026 is a long time from now, right? You could have a very different national government by the time 2026 rolls along. So both of these things are kind of, are true at the same time.
And we're starting to see that reflected in the numbers, right? I mean, you have Trump is dropping, which you might say, well, you get your inauguration boost and then you drop from there. And that's kind of true, but not totally. Like Biden kind of stayed fairly steady until Afghanistan. Like
Yep.
he had
Yep.
a good chunk of months of goodwill before all of that evaporated. And then he never kind of really
Never
gained
came.
a ton of
Yep.
ground again.
Yep. Yep.
Trump is already kind of week over week losing points. That we're seeing that even more drastically with Elon Musk, which is something I've been thinking about because we've talked about this on the pod before. This idea of, is Musk a hindrance or a help to Trump in the aggregate, right? And you have the the heat shield theory that he's absorbing negativity for Trump, which is helpful. But I think the best hindrance argument is that imagine if like Russ Vogt was in charge of doing what Elon Musk is doing, right? Like he would never tweet, he wouldn't talk publicly, we would never hear from him, people wouldn't know who he is, and he would be effectuating a lot of the same pain, but in a much quieter way,
Yep.
and
Yep.
there wouldn't be, big balls and these 19-year-olds, and it would just be it would be doing the same thing without this tech bro cowboy self-obsessed performance
Yep.
going on at the
Yep.
same time,
Yep.
and I'm sure our listeners saw Musk like allegedly pretty clearly seeming to be on drugs, like waving around a chainsaw and wearing his sunglasses inside and everything. The thing about Musk is he is just so like empty inside that the attention from this stuff is like is oxygen to him. He simply cannot go without it. So every breakage, every firing, every kind of embarrassing like, oh my god, look what they're doing here. Like it's a news cycle unto itself, right? So that is the hindrance piece, I think, is that the benefit of having a quiet operator is that not everything kind of breaks through and becomes its own headline. But with Musk, he is so vocally and publicly kind of delighting in the immiseration that I think he's putting an even more kind of like villainous face on the whole effort, which is starting, of course has to seep through to Trump, right? Because Trump is bringing him everywhere. He's like his emotional support Musk. He's sitting next to him in the Oval Office. They're doing their little like interviews together today. We're recording Wednesday. Musk is coming to the first cabinet meeting for whatever reason. So I mean that's the risk of being so closely linked to him and throwing your arm around him at every juncture is like you're in this together.
Yep. Yep. No, I think that the people who are buying the heat shield argument is, I guarantee you, wrong. It is 100% wrong. That's not how anything works. It's not like it's not like let's say you had some totally crazy, that Mike Johnson was Elon Musk. Then you might say, okay, there's some kind of triangulation going on or something like that. But everybody can see absolutely crystal clear that Elon Musk exists in this new way because of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump gave him the keys to the car, basically. And the only way that heat shield thing works is, I would say, in a politically insignificant way, which is that you might think, oh, I hate Elon Musk even more than I hate Trump. But it it's the same difference, because your impulse is, fuck this shit. We need This is terrible. We need to put someone else in charge because this is awful. And that's Donald Trump. So like, you may have some sort of residual slight, a few quantas less of hate of Trump, but in a political context, which is really all we care about, right? Which is all that matters. We don't really care, whether the average person around the country has dialed their hatred up to 10 for Trump, or they've got a new one that goes to 11, right? Who cares about that? Functionally, it's all on Trump, and in some ways, I do. It's funny. There was a piece in the Washington Post last night, that was, basically sort of starting to get into the fact that we know that some of these new cabinet secretaries, and now it's the people who've actually been confirmed by the Senate, they're in charge. They're saying don't respond to the emails. So there's some level of pushback there. And it is also clear, it's clear for a lot of reasons, but it was clear in this article. There's also people in the White House who are like, we've got to slow this down. This is hurting us a lot. And it is, as is often the case, it's not totally clear where Trump is on this. But what was interesting in that piece was they were saying, well, Musk has already put a Musk loyalist, in these 8 places at these, kind of key parts of these different these different cabinet departments and agencies and so forth. And you're kind of listening there. You're like, oh, okay, what does that mean exactly? Like, because it's kind of sounding like literally that Elon Musk has some separate basis of constitutional political authority here. Kind of Trump might want to slow it down, but Elon's already got his person in place. You know, things are getting very weird here to the point where some of this is a bit not just a coup in the sense that we were talking about 2 weeks ago, but there's some of this that I think is maybe kind of a coup against Donald Trump as well. A lot of this stuff, I'm not sure he is able to control now. I was actually talking, to just say this quickly, someone about this a couple days ago. That look, Donald Trump goes out to the cameras tomorrow and says, "Okay, hey, I love Elon. That went great, but it's done. Elon's out of the government." He can still do that, but I'm not sure he has anything but an on-off switch. And there's a lot riding on off. Off is dangerous. Off is really dangerous. And I think that's kind of where we are.
And we're already seeing little fractures. I think that was really exemplified in this weird thing that happened over the weekend where Musk told every federal employee to send a 5 bullet point list of what you did last week. And then you had even like the crazy cabinet secretaries say, don't respond to this, like, or at the very least, we don't know what this is. Don't respond until we're sure, right? And then you had some of them say, also maybe don't put anything classified in there, right? So, and I thought that was similarly to the town hall thing, like the first time that I've seen like concerted public, I don't care that this will embarrass him kind of pushback
Yep.
to
Yep.
something.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think, I mean, I'm sure it's a personality thing. I'm sure not all these people like Musk, but you just don't get that kind of thing if there's not a feeling that he is not kind of ironclad in terms of like popularity and public perception. And then, you also have the piece that these are newly confirmed cabinet secretaries, right? I mean, the kind of exchange that you're getting from serving in this particular cabinet is you get your own little fiefdom with which you get to do what you want, whether that
Yep.
be, RFK kind of canceling vaccines or Tulsi Gabbard kind of sending muffin baskets to various autocrats, right? It's like, so I think also there is a sense that you have Musk coming in and it's all well and good for him to kind of like ruin the lives of these public servants and to kind of decide that he single-handedly runs the government until you have people in these positions who are like, well, fuck off. This is my little patch of the kingdom,
Yep.
right?
And not just patch of the kingdom, that there's another issue that, say, someone like Marco Rubio, it may seem silly to us, but one of the reasons Rubio's doing this is he's thinking, I'm a young guy. Trump's almost 80, right? This is my moment. I'm gonna kick some ass here as Secretary of State. And that's gonna be the basis of my, running for president in 2032 or something like that. And if you are Marco Rubio, you don't want to have your department literally falling apart and making you look like an idiot. And that kind of applies to everybody, right? I mean, with, one of the things that really I think jumped out to everybody is one of the first out of the gate on saying no to this was Kash Patel. And
Hmm.
you're like, Kash Patel, man, this guy is like the most feral dude that Trump appointed to anything. But if you think about it, Kash Patel is thinking, I run the FBI, man. I'm gonna be like prosecuting Democrats right and left. I'm gonna be, uprooting the deep state and all this kind of stuff. I don't want to find out that Elon shut off the electricity account with the utility and the lights won't turn on. Like, this is mine now. And that was something that at first I was like, wow, why is this happening? The true Trump loyalists are in charge now and they're pushing back more. But uh as I thought about it and as people sort of, kind of set me straight, it makes perfect sense because when you have the actings are just literally I'm acting. I'm not here for long. I'm trying to get through this as well as I can. What is my interest in like picking a fight and I'll just be instantly fired and I'm just trying to keep my head down here. So in a way, Musk had a lot more freedom of movement when those people were in place. And so that's where we are now. But I feel like this is heading to like a more explosive blow up than we're imagining, which is saying a lot because I think people are imagining the worst right now, right? But it could be worse than that.
I feel like Patel was first out the gate also because he had to save face a little bit there, because there's this parallel story going on where part of the deal to kind of get him installed and to get people to go along with it was like, no worries, the deputy director will be someone real, right? Like, I'm just going to be kind of this insane figurehead, but the deputy director is not a political person, right? The director of the FBI is always political to some degree, but the
Yeah,
deputy director is like, we don't really know their names except when it's like deep throat, right? And that's because it's
yeah,
usually a really long time bureau person, 30, 40 years. These are people who are more in the kind of like operational
yep,
side of
yep.
things,
Like
who are
COO, basically.
right, and
Yeah,
who are involved in big investigations before the director is, and all that. And the deal was, we're going to get someone real. We're going to get a longtime agent, and he will kind of be a stopgap for Patel, basically. And right after that promise, they put in Don Bongino, who, if listeners have not had the privilege, is like this roided up kind of like, he looks like a pit bull. He just does.
yeah.
He's
He
like
literally does. He literally
he
does.
he has, he does the tight t-shirt thing. I mean, he was a secret service agent, and then kind of parlayed that into a career as like a right-wing commentator kind of guy after he tried to run for Congress a bunch and kept losing. So,
Like 3 or 4 times, right?
yeah. I mean, he is it's an insane person to put in that position, and that's even in the context of all the insane people we have in the cabinet. Like, that is a serious position, right? You're not just it's This is not the situation of like Pete Hegseth, where the hope is kind of like, okay, you have him there, but maybe you can like keep him siloed in his office and then have people around him to do the real stuff. Like, this is the person around him who
Yep.
is just, I mean, unqualified feels like it just doesn't meet the moment to any degree, right? I mean, you've just got uh, the newest incarnation of like Rush Limbaugh, who's supposed to be in charge
Yep.
of like operationalizing the FBI. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, one thing just for our listeners with Kash Patel is, I mean, look, we all know how horribly unqualified and dangerous in this position that he is. He is a lawyer. He did work in the Justice Department as a prosecutor. His seemingly high level things were just kind of weird acting things that Trump gave him in his first term. But I mean, he's a lawyer. He worked as a prosecutor. That puts you in the, at least on the first rung of the kind of things you in almost every case the FBI director is. As Kate was saying, you want with the deputy, you almost, that's the person who's actually been in the FBI, because not only do you not want them to be totally feral or to be smart, you need to know how the FBI, like where's the bathroom, where's the FBI gym, right? I mean, you need someone who's been there before. And Bongino, in addition to just being a complete nut, he's not a lawyer. He's never worked in law enforcement. Secret Service has law enforcement dimensions, but it's not a law enforcement agency. It's not. It's a protective agency. So it's totally off the rails. A lot of people have worked a year or two as a cop. He hasn't done that. It's so I don't even know. I would think just even at an operational level, they may need like a kind of a Sherpa for him to just, what's a warrant, right? What's a pleading? Just it's that bad.
And the thing that just really strikes you about it is like, this is totally demoralizing the Bureau, right? And you're having people say, like, even people who wouldn't be fired say, well, I don't want to stay here. I don't want to do my career here. And like, this is a really conservative corner of the government, right? I mean, classically Republican, like very right wing. And this couplet of appointments is just making anyone who's kind of not at the tail end of their career be like, well, maybe the private sector for me.
Yeah, no, and there's an additional aspect to this that, okay, Trump is president, he can pardon people for now, but I think it may come into play a lot with the FBI, maybe even more, since that's what they call in the old Soviet Union, called in the old, a power ministry, jail people, hurt people. You get asked to do things that are illegal, right? And if you are a lawyer, that's scary, right? Even if you don't get sent to prison, you can lose your law license. And it's funny that there's clearly also something going on in the uniformed military, certainly in the officer corps, that on the one hand, I mean, look, obviously the military is an inherently very conservative institution. Not always capital C conservative, but it's just inherently a very conservative institution. It is also the military is an inherently rule following institution. The whole thing is based around these rules. You follow these rules. And in terms of the culture, people in the uniformed military have a hard time drawing outside the lines, because the whole acculturation is there are rules. You do this, you do that, you don't do the other thing. It's similar. You see something similar in the Department of Justice with lawyers. Again, these are people who are, their whole career thing is based around rules, and they get fidgety when they're told, maybe not to push the envelope, maybe not to come up with creative stuff, but just like, fuck that, we're not doing that. That's hard, and we're starting to see that show up across, just sort of everywhere. And where that ends up, I who knows? Yeah, so that's going to be a theme going forward now, weeks, months, or however we are long in for this, how that plays out. But I think we have covered the fast-moving terrain for this week. Anything else we have to cover?
I think that covers it.
All right. Talk to you next week.
See you later. The Josh Marshall podcast is hosted by me, TPM reporter Kate Riga, and TPM founder, editor-in-chief Josh Marshall. The show is produced by Jackie Wilhelm. Thanks to Why Not Jansfeld for our podcast theme song, and thanks to all our TPM members who make this possible. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe wherever you listen.